Hello, everyone. This is Senator Joni Ernst. Thank you so much for taking the time to join my live telephone town hall happening right now that will focus on agriculture, our farmers in Iowa, and the work I'm doing to help our ag community. As 2021 gets underway, I am so happy to be hosting tonight's Tele-Town hall, my first of the year, to provide you with some information about what I'm focused on in the new Congress, specifically when it comes to our Iowa farmers and agriculture community. And of course, I also want tonight's call to be an opportunity to hear directly from you and to answer some of the questions you might have. And in fact, as folks are starting to join this call, if you would like to ask a question, please press *3 and you will be connected to a member of my staff who can assist you. And again, that's *3. Once again, this is Senator Joni Ernst holding a live telephone town hall that is starting right now. And before we get started, I'd like to first thank all of Iowa's farmers and producers for their tireless work, especially during this pandemic. Since the beginning, they have been working day in and day out to continue feeding and fueling not only our state, but the entire nation. Farmers truly are the backbone of our rural communities, and that's why, as a member of the Senate Agriculture Committee, I'm proud to always fight tooth and nail on your behalf and to make sure Iowa has a seat at the table when it comes to ag policy. As an eternal optimist, I am hopeful we can work together with the new administration in a bipartisan way to deliver for Iowa farmers and the American people. I am always looking for ways to work across the aisle with Democrats, Republicans, and independents to deliver results for Iowa. In fact, right now, I am working with folks in both parties on some of the issues that are critical for our state, like ensuring that we always uphold the Renewable Fuel Standard, the RFS, to support our ethanol and biodiesel producers, and fighting against burdensome regulations that impact our farmers. But no matter who is serving in the White House, as Iowa's junior senator, I will remain focused on putting Iowa's interests first. And for folks that are just joining, thank you so much for taking part in tonight's Farmers Telephone Town Hall. If you would like to ask a question on today's call, please press *3 and you will be connected to a member of my staff who can help you. And again, that's *3. Now, folks, in the year ahead and with a new administration, there's no question we'll be facing challenges, but you can be sure that I will be holding this administration accountable. And one area that I'll be particularly focused on is WOTUS, or the Waters of the United States Rule. In fact, just this past week, I led a resolution in the Senate in support of the Trump administration's Navigable Waters Protection, which, as you may recall, replaced the Obama-era WOTUS rule. We all remember back when the Obama-Biden administration attempted to regulate nearly 97% of the land in Iowa with their WOTUS rule. I was proud to fight back and stand up for the livelihoods of hardworking Iowans. We won that fight, and a new, more flexible WOTUS rule was put in place under the Trump administration. Now it's critical we uphold the new, more flexible rule and prevent the Biden administration from reverting back to the old and misguided WOTUS regulations, which will make it harder for Iowans to farm, ranch, and build. Another critical priority for me will be to make sure the Biden administration upholds the RFS and supports our biofuel industry. And you can be sure I'll be holding the EPA's feet to the fire on that. Unfortunately, in just his first couple weeks on the job, President Biden has made some concerning decisions when it comes to renewable energy. In the last few days, he ordered the federal government to begin a transition to electric vehicles. I believe this is the wrong path to go down and could have detrimental impacts on Iowa's renewable fuel industry. I'm urging this administration not to give in to the misguided political demands of the left and to change course by instead promoting biofuel. I strongly believe we should be investing in our biofuel industry, not moving away from it. That means adopting higher biofuel blends like E15 and beyond, and investing in expanded biofuel infrastructure that will provide consumers with better access to cleaner, cheaper choices at the pump. I'll be keeping up the fight for our farmers and will always stand up for our biofuel producers. For folks that are just joining, I want to thank you very much for taking part in tonight's Farmers Telephone Town Hall. And if you would like to ask a question on tonight's call, please press *3 and you will be connected to a member of my staff who will be able to help you. And again, that's *3. Now, tonight I'm very excited to be joined on this live telephone town hall by Iowa's very own Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Naig. And I am thrilled to have Secretary Naig on the line with us today as he fights for our farmers every single day in Iowa. And Mike, would you like to go ahead and give an introduction?
Well, excellent, and thank you, Joni. It's great to be back with you on a town hall, and thanks to everyone who's joined us this evening. Certainly, these are consequential times for agriculture in this country, and there's a lot to talk about. So great to be able to join you. Senator, I want to start by saying I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful that we'll continue to have your strong voice in Washington representing Iowa agriculture at this critical time. Of course, your role on the Agriculture Committee, the Environment and Public Works Committee, and not the subject of tonight's conversation, but your role on the Armed Services Committee, very, very important to have that voice. And on the last committee in particular, thanks for what you do to support our men and women in uniform and to protect our country. It's a very, very important job, and thank you for that. As I said, a consequential time for agriculture policy in our country, recovering from 2020. 2020 brought us unprecedented challenges that were matched with an unprecedented level of response. And these challenges certainly cast a spotlight on the important role that agriculture plays in our entire food chain. And it reminded us of all the essential workers that show up, again, from everything it takes to put a crop in the ground and care for livestock every single day, all the way down through the chain to when consumers access food or fuel. And everybody in that chain is critically important to us, and we've been reminded of that, I think, this year. Folks had to get creative and certainly showed our resiliency here in the state of Iowa. On top of the unprecedented the challenge to our supply chain because of COVID, we also had, on top of that, historic weather events, of course, a drought and the derecho, and we continue to be dry in the state of Iowa as we head into 2021, and that certainly is something that is on the minds of producers all across the state, we know. Of course, with the new administration, there's an opportunity now to, as the Senator I'm sure will talk about, there'll probably be questions, to ask the right questions and secure commitments, if possible, from nominees to key positions like Ag Secretary and EPA Administrator, among many others that will appear before certainly the committees that the Senator serves on. There's a long list of important issues to agriculture that we're thinking about here in Iowa, but certainly that play out in the federal level. Recovery continues to be top of mind, providing the right level of support for impacted market sectors. Of course, strong biofuels policy, and more broadly, a renewable energy sector. We should never talk about climate or carbon neutrality without thinking about biofuels or renewable energy. Proper regulatory environment. And Senator, thank you so much for mentioning WOTUS and for the work that you've done. This is critically important, not just Iowa, but Iowans of all backgrounds. We must hold the line on this important flexibility that you mentioned. Thanks for your leadership on that. Of course, taxes, making sure our tax policy here in Iowa and federally is pro-family, pro-growth. Trade agreements, enforcement of existing agreements, all of these are critically important to Iowa. Making sure that we're staying on track with non-regulatory approaches to soil health and water quality. And how do we then bring carbon into that conversation in a way that's positive for our farmers and perhaps generates revenue? For market transparency, especially in our cattle market, and those emerging carbon markets, in foreign animal disease prevention, workforce challenges, and of course, thinking about that farm bill that will be coming sooner rather than later, and in how do we continue to support important risk management tools like crop insurance and other farm bill programs as well. So there's a lot on the agenda, a lot of things to work on and think about. 2020's taught us some important lessons. Let's make sure we pull those forward, and then let's forget about the rest of 2020 as fast as we can and move on. And I'm very optimistic, Senator, as well, about the year ahead of us, and anxious to get into it. So thanks again to all of you for joining us. And Senator, thanks for the invitation to join you this evening.
Oh, well, I am so thrilled to have you on with us, Secretary, and thank you so much for the great work that you are doing for Iowa, all of our farmers and ranchers, and certainly the support that you lend to those in the renewable fuels industry as well. It is very important to our wonderful state. Now, we are going to go ahead and start taking some questions. We do have some that are submitted online, and we will have hopefully some live callers as well. The first question is an online question, and it comes from Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is asking, is WOTUS really going to surface in an unkind way for agriculture? And Elizabeth, yes, and Mike, you might agree as well, but yes, what we struggled with through the Obama WOTUS rule was pretty substantial, because it did regulate 97% of Iowa's land, and not just water and not just rivers, but actual land. And there were a number of cases all across the United States where farmers were being fined significantly by the Environmental Protection Agency for just simply, like a farmer in California. He faced $40 million in penalties, and he ended up paying $1.1 million to settle with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer claims. And what they claim is he broke the law by plowing his farm to plant a wheat crop. It is extremely significant. And so what we don't want to go back to is this heavy-handed over-regulation by the federal government. So what we're trying to do is encourage the current administration to continue with the President Trump era rules for navigable waters. In my experience with WOTUS, this is the one issue all across Iowa. It didn't matter if it was farming or ranching. It didn't matter if it was manufacturing, home building, even county secondary roads. The county engineers were writing to me. Everyone agreed it was a horrible, horrible overburdensome regulation from the Obama era. So yes, it really is very detrimental to agriculture, having the federal government telling you what you can and cannot do on your own property. Mike, why don't you throw into, because you are also very, very familiar with WOTUS.
Absolutely, and very well put. It's the quintessential overreach of federal government, right? It's clear that the government does have a role to play in certain waters, navigable waters, but the way that the Obama era rule was written, as the Senator said, that rule reached way up into our property and way up into Iowa, with 97% of our land being impacted, and that's just too much. It gets in the way of, and I totally agree. I saw a coalition of folks come together to oppose that like I've never seen before, from all across all walks of life in Iowa. And the other thing that we think about from conservation standpoint is it can actually get in the way of doing the positive conservation work, soil conservation, soil erosion prevention, and water quality practices, because the federal government's in the way, driving up the cost and slowing things down. So I think the simple answer is yes, it absolutely can, and get in the way, and it's something that we must hold the line on the current definition.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Mike. Thanks so much. And the next, we do have a caller, Jerry. You had a question about electric vehicles. Go ahead, Jerry. Maybe. Do we have Jerry on the line?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, my
Okay,
question was
good.
basically holding the federal government or Biden's feet to the fire and have the federal government, you know, with E85 vehicles on all their mandate or something like that, all their vehicles be E85 compliant and biodiesel compliant, and plus all new vehicles they purchase. That can make an immediate impact now, and have the federal government lead by example by coming out and doing something like that.
Well, we were hopeful, and it's a very timely question, too, because we actually did have former governor and former Secretary of Ag, Tom Vilsack, on our virtual meeting today with the Senate Agricultural Committee. And this is one of the things I was asking Secretary Vilsack about. He has been nominated to be President Biden's Secretary of Agriculture as well. And what President Biden did last week, he put out an executive order that said, going forward, all the vehicles purchased by the federal government will be electric vehicles. So I asked Secretary Vilsack, what do you think about that? Will you be forcing the USDA to purchase the Tesla trucks that are out there, electric trucks, or are you going to encourage the purchase of, Ford F-150s that can run on E85? And, he gave an answer that said it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. And he said as we're transitioning the federal government to electric vehicles, we can still use, vehicles that run on E85. And he basically led the way into we're going to transition pretty much to an electric fleet, but it's going to take a while to do that. And so in the meantime, we'll use biofuels. But then he indicated, at some point we'd like to see the Department of Defense using more biofuels, in their ships or in their vehicles. So if we're using biodiesel to power them, that would be a good thing. But bottom line, we have an executive order from this president that says we are going to move to electric vehicles for the federal government. And my fear would be then how much sooner until they mandate that our car companies start or stop manufacturing vehicles with internal combustion engines. That's a much bigger step out there. But, if we're going to start it with the federal government, then I could see it going elsewhere as well. So we're going to try and push biofuels as much as we can and continue operating in that space as long as we can. And guaranteed, I'm going to keep holding, whether it's USDA or EPA or even this administration, holding their feet to the fire. Okay. Mike, did you have any thoughts on that? I know we use E85 vehicles as well.
You bet. I'd only add that, again, and I mentioned it earlier, that, this conversation around that we should go EV because that's the way that we can reduce carbon, and it's dismissing the idea that today we're delivering low carbon fuels to the marketplace in the form of biodiesel and ethanol. A recent study out showing a biofuel made from corn, ethanol made from corn, 46% lower carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions than gasoline. That's already happening today. We're only getting better. And so any conversation, we have to ensure that any conversation around climate, carbon, is including biofuels. There's already benefits being delivered today. Why aren't we talking more about expanding that access and driving up more demand to achieve those goals? So It's certainly, I agree, Senator, we're going to have to continue to fight every step of the way on this one.
Right, exactly. We're going to have to keep pushing that, and I do hope that Secretary Vilsack, he should be confirmed fairly quickly through the United States Senate, but having been the governor of Iowa, having served as the Secretary of Agriculture, my great hope is that he will also be out there, pushing for this, making sure that the federal government understands that we have taken significant steps to downsize our carbon footprint through the use of renewable fuels. So we will keep pushing that. I really appreciate the question, Jerry. And next, we do have another online question. And for folks that are, wondering how to ask a question, please press *3, and a member of my staff will help. So again, it's *3. Okay, the online question is from Barry, and Barry says, "Thank you for supporting renewable fuels. How can we hold the EPA accountable to stop SRE waivers, the small refinery exemption waivers?" Exceptional question, Barry, and this is one that we have been trying to fight in Congress. And of course, this is not a partisan issue. Support for the renewable fuels, obviously, it transcends political divides. The problem is then we end up with oil states versus some of our Midwestern agriculture states. And what we have tried to do, of course, is to do what we can through Congress. That means we are having conversations not only with members in the EPA, leaders in the EPA, but then also with the administrations. But bottom line, when they are finding loopholes in the law or other means, really the only other action that can be taken is when those that are having harm done to them, like our biofuel refineries, producers, what they do then is go through the court system. It ends up going through our judicial system. And actually, we have had a number of court decisions that tend to favor renewable fuels. So that's what we're doing right now. We've seen that move out there in industry. And then what the EPA, and I had a conversation with the EPA nominee the other day, and he basically is saying, well, just let the courts play it out. I would love to see EPA take a little more affirmative action by saying we support renewable fuels. He wasn't ready to do that during our conversation, but we do have to see how it plays out through the courts, and then we go from there. But I believe that the small refineries oftentimes are tied to much larger entities, and they're just looking for any way that they can be excused from having to blend with ethanol. So we'll do what we can on our end, but then the rest will be left to the court system. So, Mike, thoughts there too?
Yes, again, and this is where we need an EPA to do their job, follow the intent of Congress, follow the law. And it's not comforting at all to hear a reference to let's let the courts decide. We've seen far too much of that. So again, I think this is just one of those examples of where through the confirmation process to ask those right questions and then do the job of oversight and holding the EPA and the administration accountable. We just will have to continue to do that. But there is no doubt that SREs have hurt, and we need to curtail this activity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we fully support our biofuels industry, and we need an EPA that will do the same as well. So thank you for that question, Barry. We really appreciate it. Mark, we have a caller as well. Mark, go ahead. It was about the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah, thank you, Senator and Secretary, for your hard work. Question in regards to the payroll protection plan. The loans that are out, as a farmer, I would qualify, but I'm a farming partnership. We don't file our Schedule F isn't allowed in that procedure, and I'm just wondering if there's could be something looked into so that a farming partnership, general partnership, could
go under the same guidelines as a a regular partner in that application process. Today it's 1065, and it only considers wages paid to the farmers and not gross receipts.
Yes, and we have heard about this, Mark, and we have tried to make some of those corrections. We have not been as successful as we had hoped, and of course, as we move through this, we will continue working with the SBA. But what I would encourage you to do, if you wouldn't mind, and this is for everybody else on the call too, that if you have specific questions or information that we need to know, please pass it along to us. And if you would, Mark, here's a number that I'd like for you to take down. And the number is to my Des Moines office. And they do casework in these offices, but it's also a great place for us to gather information. So I could take your information, go back to the Small Business Administration and say, hey, what is it going to take to include this, or this in our legislation and through their rules-making process. So the number for the Des Moines office is 515-284-4574. And again, I'll repeat that number. And again, it's for anything. It's if you have casework, 515-284-4574. And so again, Mark, we have been trying to get that issue through to the SBA. If there is a potential next package, it is something that we could continue to work on with them. But right now we've just got a lot of work and information to gather up. But if you don't mind calling that number, passing along your information, then we can do a little deeper dive into it and make sure that we're addressing your concerns. So really good question. The Paycheck Protection Program was a good program for small businesses, but because our farmers do operate on different schedules, it wasn't included in that first package. So we'll continue to work on that. The next question we have, and again, if you have questions, press *3. And we'll have a member help you with your question. This is an online question from Rod. And Rod is asking, how do you see, this is a good one, and Secretary Naig, I might have you answer this one as well. How do you see voluntary carbon markets playing a role to increase on-farm revenue and reduce emissions for Iowa's ag community? I'll let you kick that one off, Mike.
You bet. First of all, I think that the first thing I would say is it absolutely, we believe, is an opportunity to generate additional revenue for farmers with this carbon market situation. Now, having said that, there are some questions, and I think first of all, we need to be able to validate what the practices do in terms of sequestration. And, that's been one of the hallmarks of our nutrient reduction strategy in Iowa, is that we started with a science assessment that was done at Iowa State. The research and the data and the literature show us that when you do certain practices, you can achieve certain reductions. We need the very robust science behind the same kind of conversation on carbon. And I think that's one of those essentials. We need that scientific foundation underlying the whole premise here. And then, of course, you get into the idea of how do we have markets that function in a way that's transparent, that what you're getting and what others are getting, and that system works with transparency and predictability to the extent that it can. So I think there's a lot of questions, and we need a lot of input. And I think that's an important thing for USDA needs to be hearing from a lot of folks. They need to listen to a lot of folks about how to do these things. But also then how we can connect this carbon opportunity with what's happening on the ground. We've got a lot of work that's been done here in the state of Iowa. We have a lot to be proud of in terms of the work that's been done to move us forward on reducing phosphorus and nitrogen, and how can we continue those great things and improve our sustainability, but also, again, drive revenue back to farms. So I'm excited about what that can mean, but there's a lot of work and a lot of questions that still need to be answered, and we need to be at the table. So I think that's an important thing for the agriculture community, is to be at the table, be a part of this, and figure out the solutions.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, and I have been hearing so much from our farmers on this issue, and those that are really interested in finding that other line of revenue, of course, for their operations. And so what I have done, I have joined Senators Mike Braun of Indiana and Debbie Stabenow of Michigan on their Growing Climate Solutions Act. And this act, it promotes key ag practices and land management decisions in the discussion of greenhouse gas emissions and climate policy. It is a market-driven approach, which I think is very important to make sure that it is a market-driven approach and not something mandated by the federal government. So there's much to be learned about these types of activities. This would create a certification program at the USDA, and so it is important that the USDA is gathering that information, and what it would do help solve those technical entry barriers to our farmer and forest landowners that are participating in these carbon credit markets. So there's a lot more. I was slow to get onto this act because I wanted to hear more from our Iowa farmers and understand a little bit more about where they wanted us to head. And certainly I've been asking those in various industries as well to provide feedback on different pieces of legislation. The one that Mike Braun of Indiana has, the one that I've joined, I believe Senator Grassley is also on that. They've been showing interest at least. This is probably the one that would be best for Iowa farmers, and again, just focusing on the fact that it is a market-driven approach. So it is exciting to look forward and think maybe this is a way we can benefit our farmers and also assist the climate. But we're looking for additional input too. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the climate, but also providing some sort of benefit to our farmers. So a lot more to follow in that area for certain. Thomas,
Senator,
I think
Senator,
yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Senator, if I could just add one more thing, and this is something I hear from a lot of folks as I travel the state is, hey, there's been some great adoption of some of these practices, of course, cover crops and no-till, and folks doing the right things already.
Right.
And so we should also take that into account, that there's folks that have been investing in these practices for many, many years, and that we shouldn't just say, hey, it's from this point forward that folks can benefit from adopting practices, that there has to be some consideration, I believe, given to the investments that have been made. So I know that's another piece of feedback that I've certainly been receiving as I've traveled and talked with folks.
No, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. And then Thomas, go ahead, Thomas. We have Thomas on the phone and asking about increasing challenges in biofuels. We have you, Thomas. Well, I can maybe go ahead. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Excuse me. Given all the consternation and the challenges we presently have with value-added biofuels, what considerations are being made for other development of other value-added Iowa agricultural products?
No, that is a great question, Thomas. And Mike, I know that you track a lot of what's going on as far as value added. Why don't I let you kick that off, and then I'll talk a little bit about a conversation I had with Dr. Winterstein today.
Yes. Well, first of all, a great question, and it's the sort of that what next, right? I believe that there's a lot of there's a lot of room to grow our biofuels industry yet, right? There's still an opportunity, and we need to get creative on some some approaches to how we continue to drive demand at the state level, and as states in the Midwest, and there's some work that's going to be done, I believe, in the legislative session this year on that front, and that's so stay tuned for that. Availability and access to higher blends is a big deal, and there's a lot of room to grow there. But you're spot on. There's opportunities beyond. We're in so many ways we're just scratching the surface in the bioeconomy and things that we can make using the things that we grow in the state of Iowa so well. So there needs to be yet a significant amount of research done and market development on some of those things. But again, let's talk broadly about renewable energy. Let's not just limit that to ethanol and biodiesel. Let's think broader, and how can that be bio-based, and then materials. And there's a lot of work that's done at Iowa State and startups across our state to look at how do we increasingly use bio-based materials and bio-based chemicals, things that are currently made from petroleum that can absolutely be bio-based. Those are the things that we need to be thinking on, and there's a tremendous amount of opportunity.
Yes, and I think spot on. I had the great fortune earlier today of visiting with Dr. Wendy Winterstein, the president at Iowa State University, and a key component of our discussion today was talking about research and development that is being done at Iowa State University, and a lot of that does center on value-added agriculture. And it's just as Secretary Naig said, there are so many other things. We need to, of course, continually focus on our biofuels and advanced biofuels, but there are many other compounds that are being used to provide convenience out in our society, things like bioplastics or other types of uses of materials that are commonly grown across the state of Iowa, but given a new lease on life with value-added agriculture. So it is exciting, and one of the things that Dr. Winterstein is always encouraging me to do, Senator Grassley to do, the entire Iowa delegation, is to continue to invest in these programs from the federal level, making sure that we are supportive of research and development at our land-grant universities. And so, believe me, we know that there are challenges out there. We need to make sure that agriculture remains viable, not just feeding a population, but in other areas of our life as well. So I'm excited about what they're doing at Iowa State. It sounds like they do have a number of projects that are ongoing, but always working for the betterment of the Iowa farmer and making sure that we are able to continue in family farming for decades to come. So really excited about that, and excited about what these young bright minds are coming up with. So thanks so much for that question. Next, Craig. Craig has called in as well, and he is concerned about the USDA's way of determining crop yield. Craig, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your situation?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, in 2019, they come out in August with a huge yield, and the USDA stayed with that yield clear up until this midsummer or late summer. And that 2019 crop kind of got sold by every farmer, really, for way under value of what it actually should have been based on what the carryover should have been had they had the right number. And it seems like every year they come out with a huge number early on, like August, September, October, and then it just starts tapering off a little bit. But my real concern with the USDA is just their antiquated ways of doing things and how they're not open to change. And an example of that is we have to certify our crop acreage July 15th, but USDA does not release that acreage till sometime in October, the October crop report. Whereas any private industry, I mean, Walmart can tell you how many cans of soup they sold yesterday. across the board. And so I really think that something needs to happen with USDA to get them up to speed, whether it's, technology or, just their decision making or something to get them up to speed with the real world these days.
Yeah, no, agreed. And we actually do get a number of calls about this. And Mike, I'm sure you get the same too at the state level.
Absolutely. And Craig, I wish I could say you were alone in some of that you're feeling and hearing, and I hear it too. And I think you're spot on in the sense that USDA there is an opportunity for them to improve, obviously, through the use of technology and how they do things and the timeliness around that. Hey, there's a balance, right? There's great value in having certain surveys and calculations and things that have been done the same way for years and years, right? That provides us with baselines, and if you change things too dramatically, then suddenly that historical data maybe isn't as important. So there's value in that. Don't hear me wrong, but there is no doubt, I believe, that that things can't be done better at USDA, particularly with NASS, because again, you need that third party. I believe that I think there's value in having a USDA involved in producing this very important market moving information. But I think you're spot on that there's lots of room for improvement here, and it needs a significant investment.
Yes, and I guess I would agree with that as well. I don't know what the right answer is, though, and again, we do hear from so many different people concerned about sometimes how the data is collected, whether they're doing like a telephone interview or they're doing it over the mail, however it happens to be, or sometimes people will worry about there's an off year. This year we had the derecho. How is that going to overall affect the data and the data collection? So there are anomalies out there, and they do take that into consideration, but we still get a lot of calls about what we expect the crop yields to be. So I have not come out with or heard the perfect way of determining this, but certainly if people have suggestions that we can run through with USDA and NASS, that would be very, very helpful. And I don't know, Mike, if you have suggestions on how we can better do this, but this has been a question we've had for a number of years now, and we haven't arrived at anything that would allow us to do it better or faster.
And I think the other piece that there's an opportunity for better coordination within the USDA building itself. I think the Trump administration took a significant step with a reorganization. If you all remember, Secretary Northey oversaw NRCS, FSA, and Risk Management Agency. Putting that all under one undersecretary, in theory, gives you better coordination there. And I think to continue to look for ways to coordinate and streamline those three agencies, a lot of the data that are within those silos could be useful if those things were better connected. So I think they made great strides over the last 4 years, and that's something that I hope that this incoming administration will continue, is that streamlining of those three agencies in particular.
Certainly, and thanks for that, Mike, too, and that might be something that we can continue to have conversations about as well. I think that is very important. Jacob, go ahead. You've got a question about estate tax.
Yes, sorry about that. I had you on mute.
That's okay.
Well, thank you, Senator Ernst and Secretary Naig, for doing this tonight and reaching out to us. I know there's a lot of questions that we've got out here and a lot of uneasiness. I was down at the Iowa Ag Expo today and had a booth down there and had a lot of conversations with a lot of concerned farmers out there with what's going to go on and where we're going to be able to go from here, from the waters of the U.S. to everything involved. So my question revolves around the rumblings we're hearing about removing the stepped-up basis and the inheritance tax, and just the general uneasiness, not only from farmers but business owners and professionals alike, of what that could do to us in long-term planning and succession planning, and just everything involved with moving generations of family farms down to the next and keeping it in the hands of the family. So thank you.
Yeah, no, and certainly I wish that I had a better answer for you today, Jacob. And it was just 2 weekends ago, I was having lunch with my mother and my brother-in-law and sister, and we were actually sitting at her kitchen table talking about this very thing. And my mother, with her farms, she wants to know, the best way to protect that for my brother, my sister, and I. And so that we had quite a lengthy conversation there, and that's where you really have to have conversations with those that are in estate planning and know how to pass those farms on to the next generation. I know that's not getting to the heart of your question, because we all want to know what's going to happen in the Biden administration. And unfortunately, like I said, I can't answer that today. But what I can say is that certainly Senator Grassley and I are going to be fighting tooth and nail to make sure that we are protecting our farm livelihoods across the state of Iowa. We know that there are rumblings out there, and certainly the Democrats have given indications that they would like to repeal the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They would like to go in and increase taxes for certain categories. We don't know what their plan is yet, but again, I can guarantee you that as it's impacting our farmers, we certainly will push back against that. There are those that simply don't understand that so much of what we have in our farming communities is wrapped up in the land. It's wrapped up in equipment, and it's not like you have a wad of cash sitting in the bank. So we will be aware of that. We will watch for that upcoming. Mike, any inspirational words for us?
Unfortunately, no. I think I tend to take people at their word, and this administration ran on raising taxes, intending to do so, and I think they're going to do that, and so I do think that, Senator, you nailed it. It's really important for folks to understand the reality on the ground for farmers, farm families, and where their assets are and what they are and how that factors into estate planning. So I'm confident you do know that and understand that and are fighting for that. And so I think that's what we have to do. And I would also, I'm glad you started the way you did, Senator, is would also highly recommend, the estate planning is something you need help with, and don't be afraid to ask. And there's lots of resources out there, and it unfortunately, it does take, I think, some professional help to do it well and do it right, and so we would always encourage folks to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And the last question we have tonight, Terry. Terry is on the phone as well and has concerns about some of these electric vehicles. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me, Senator?
I sure can, Terry. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for taking my call. It's not so much a question, but a conversation.
Sure.
We're in the aerial application business in Iowa, oldest company operating continuously in Iowa, and we're really proud of our part in the cover crop and the nitrogen management issues that we participate in. That being said, our market, just like all of agriculture, is always unpredictable. And I was a meteorologist before I was a crop duster. I've been concerned about windmills, not only from the standpoint of the burdens and the hazards that they create for our industry, which are significant, but they do have an effect on the lower atmosphere below 850 millibars or so. That's well proven. They change rain patterns, near-term weather factors substantially, and we've got farmer customers that have seen that in the neighborhood of these large wind farms. I have asked many times of many different people to break down the actual carbon cost of the installation of a wind turbine, and I apologize to Senator Grassley up front, but the cost from the beginning of manufacture to the completion, transportation, erection, etc., through the operation, and then the disposal, the carbon cost versus the carbon saved. I have yet to ever get an answer on that question. From the standpoint of electric vehicles, they sound great. There's certainly a place for electric vehicles in most any segment of our economy, but you never hear you hear about the problems with petroleum, but you never hear about the problems associated with the battery technology that's going to be required to drive all these electric vehicles. And the cobalt manufacturing or mining and the lithium is extremely environmentally unfriendly. The people doing the work generally in the Congo are small units. They employ a terrible number of young people, 8, 9, 10 years old, working in these small mining situations. Even the larger ones have yet to figure out how to do it in an environmentally sound way. So, and I was reading an article today, and this was not a political article at all, but they say that is not a sustainable industry. But we never hear the negatives. We always hear the negatives about petroleum, but we never hear the negatives about green. And I think there are probably just as many negatives about green as there are about solar. All energy gets some subsidies. I benefit certainly from the ethanol industry, but at least the ethanol industry helps individual Iowans, individual Americans. These other industries help the very, very few. And in Warren Buffett's own words, the only way wind works is through federal subsidies. That's my comments.
Well, thank you, Terry, and thanks for raising the issue on the electric vehicles as well, because there are cons associated with that. And we don't often think about that because we think, well, there's no tailpipe emissions coming from those electric vehicles. But certainly, as you talked about the mining for the chemicals and the metals, that is increasing the consumption of those materials and the mining. What kind of footprint is that creating? The dependency on electricity, if you think about it now, there are still parts of our nation that experiences rolling blackouts because they can't provide enough electricity. Certainly if we're being mandated to move towards electric vehicles, that's a consideration. We still have to generate electricity. Where is that coming from? And what strain is that putting on natural resources? And then certainly the batteries. And we have heard so many things about the batteries for the electric vehicles. And you're right, they're often manufactured in other nations, maybe not under the types of situations that we would find allowable or palatable here in the United States. So there are a number of issues that are out there, and people don't often take that into consideration. So I do take your comments and do respect the comments that you made, because we do need to think start to finish, is this good for the environment? So Mike, did you have any thoughts on that either?
Completely agree. And Terry, I think you nailed it with the comment of remember renewables helps many. And I think, of course, we know that right here, homegrown, renewable energy that is refined in our oftentimes small communities, that means jobs and economic impact to our state. And that should not be lost in this conversation. In addition to remember that we're already delivering a fuel to the marketplace that's got a better carbon and greenhouse gas emissions profile to petroleum, and we should not sweep that away in the name of what's new.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Terry, for your comments. Mike, do you have any closing comments for our listeners tonight?
Well, again, thanks everybody for joining us. Great questions, and as we said at the beginning, there's a lot going on. It's really important to have a strong voice representing us in Washington. Senator Ernst, I'm so thankful that it's you and that we have a chance to interact with you, and that I also know, and I've seen you do it, and you'll continue to do it, and that's to get around the state, to travel to all 99, to seek people out, to listen to them, and then carry that voice and that perspective to Washington for us, and that's so important right now. So thanks for what you're doing. Thanks everybody for joining us, and I look forward to seeing everybody on the road.
That sounds great. And Mike, thanks so much. You as well. Get out across our beautiful state of Iowa doing your own 99 county tour, and we're so thankful for that. I had the opportunity to ask Chuck Grassley today how many counties he has done, and he is up to 10. I only have 3. Now I do have more coming up this weekend, but I am way behind. But I will continue to travel.
I think we're tied, but I had a snow day, so I
yes.
a little bit of maybe a waiver from Senator Grassley.
But I will continue getting out across the state of Iowa. I've started this next 99 county tour. I'm excited about the opportunity to get out and see everyone, hear from everyone. Certainly the Tele-Town halls are very important in connecting with you as well. Now, I do have 5 offices across the state of Iowa. I have them in Des Moines, Davenport, Cedar Rapids, Sioux City, and Council Bluffs, and we can help folks that are having issues with various federal agencies. So whether it's Social Security, immigration issues, Medicare, you name it, my staff is always ready and willing to assist. That number, again, is 515-284-4574, 515-284-4574, or certainly you can stay on the line after our call concludes tonight. Leave a message, and a member of my staff will be happy to contact you back, and they will be able to assist. So thanks, everyone, for joining our call tonight. My sincerest thanks and appreciation to you, Secretary Mike Naig of Iowa. God bless you for your hard work. Thanks to all of our farmers, ranchers that joined us tonight, and everyone stay safe and stay strong. God bless our great state of Iowa. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.